Previously on Prophecy of Atlantis. Queen Melusine fell, giving her life to bring an heir into the world. Her son was hidden beneath fire and sworn to secrecy. And in the ruins of Thal'Aeria, Kalor claimed the throne. Prophecy of Atlantis, Tides of Fire, Season 1, Chapter 1. Dreams of Thal'Aeria.
The early morning sun seeped through gauzy curtains into a bedroom that seemed to be caught between two worlds. Star charts covered the walls, alongside posters detailing the anatomy of a redwood tree that had fascinated Diana Wellrock since childhood. Her Monterey Bay Aquarium volunteer badge hung from a corkboard, next to her final class schedule for California State University Monterey Bay, and a photo of her and Mark at Point Lobos, his arm around her shoulders. Diana twisted in her sheets, her caramel skin sheened with sweat as another dream held her in its grip. Her long black spiral curls like her mother's, wild and untamed, spread across her pillow like dark water. The constellation of freckles across her nose and cheeks, inherited from her father, seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. Not just reflecting light, but emitting it, a subtle glow that pulsed with her quickened heartbeat. The cold touch of water against her skin felt so real, the pressure of depths no human should survive, the distant cries of a woman she had never met, and a city beneath the sea that shimmered with both beauty and blood. In her dream, coral towers crumbled before her eyes. Thal'Aeria, a name that came to her with complete certainty despite never having heard it before, was falling. Water pressed around her, thick as oil, closing in. Cold currents coiled around her wrists and ankles, pulling her downward, deeper. Voices echoed in the blackness. Divina. She should have been drowning. Instead, she breathed. Coral towers stretched into the abyss, glowing with eerie purple bioluminescence, their light casting ghostly patterns across the ocean floor. Then the blood came. Dark clouds unfurled through the currents, thick, inky, and oozy. Something was dying here. Amidst the drowning city, a dark ship with black sails appeared, cutting silently through the dream waters. A man stood at its helm, nautical tattoos glowing faintly under the eerie moonlight. Though his face remained in shadow, Diana felt a strange pull toward him, a connection she couldn't explain. The throne room, once bustling with activity, now lay silent. The echoes of past conversations and laughter had faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that pressed down on her with the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by the ethereal glow that emanated from the heart of the chamber. And then, there he was. A figure, shrouded in a luminescence that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, materialized upon the throne. The golden light was so intense that it obscured his features, casting his face in perpetual shadow. It was as if he existed in a dimension between the physical and the divine, his presence a paradox of both intimacy and distance. He raised his hand towards her, his gesture imbued with an unspoken invitation. It was a simple movement, yet it held the power to unravel the mysteries that had haunted her for so long. The air crackled with anticipation, each beat of her heart echoing the rhythm of the universe as she took a hesitant step forward. A silent plea. A promise. Diana lifted her hand to meet his. Her phone buzzed, shattering the dream. A text from Mark made her heart clench with an unfamiliar guilt. "Morning, beautiful. Got you a surprise for breakfast. Something to help with the dreams." Diana sat up, touching her temples where a headache was already forming. The dreams always left her feeling hollow, like she'd lost something essential but couldn't remember what. She glanced at her phone again, reading Mark's thoughtful message. Mark Chen, her boyfriend of about 8 months, had been good friends since middle school. Pre-med student with perfect grades and a perfect future planned out, the normal life she was supposed to want, what she does want. But lately, that life felt like a script she was struggling to follow. Mark noticed, Of course he did. He noticed everything. His concern showed in little ways: herbal tea that was supposed to help with sleep, articles about stress management bookmarked on her laptop, gentle suggestions about seeing someone about the dreams. All perfectly rational solutions for what he saw as a perfectly rational problem. If only she could tell him the truth. About how the sea lions at work seemed to whisper to her now. About how the deep tank's residents changed their swimming patterns when she walked by. About how the tide pool creatures reached for her with impossible awareness. But Mark's world was one of medical textbooks and peer-reviewed studies. There was no room in it for the impossible things that kept happening around her, was there? Her gaze drifted to the window, where frost patterns, delicate and intricate, had mysteriously formed overnight, despite the mild autumn Monterey weather. They resembled a crown of stars, the pattern too deliberate to be random. Diana swung her legs over the side of the bed, her caramel-colored toes curling against the cool hardwood floor. For a moment she sat there, touching the freckles that dusted across her nose and cheeks, remembering how the figure in her dreams had reached for her. Her bright green eyes, striking against her African-American features, stared back at her from the mirror, and for a moment they seemed to shift like sea glass in sunlight. A familiar scent drifted up from the kitchen, coffee and something sweet, mingled with that distinct otherworldly scent she'd always associated with her father's herb collection. Looking at her reflection, Diana felt caught between worlds. Not just her mixed heritage visible in her features, but something deeper. Something that made both Mark's careful plans and her own attempts at normalcy feel increasingly like a beautiful lie. She found her parents in the kitchen, which itself was a study in contrasts. Sleek modern appliances shared space with herb bundles hanging from the ceiling, her father's influence. Her mother, Joyce Wellrock, commanded the space with the same precision she brought to her operating room. Still in her surgical scrubs from Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula, where she was chief of trauma surgery, her black curls were pulled back in a neat bun, though a few rebellious strands had escaped during her night shift. Her brown eyes, warm and observant, missed nothing as she flipped pancakes with practiced efficiency. Thomas Wellrock tended to his Egyptian blue lotus flowers in a large rose quartz crystal bowl of water, the blooms actively turning toward him as if seeking his attention. His fair skin was dusted with freckles that seemed to shift and dance in certain lights, his short, soft blonde curls catching the sunlight like spun gold. Even in simple clothes, a light linen shirt and jeans, he carried an otherworldly beauty that turned heads. An ornate silver ring adorned his right hand, a signet ring with a star-shaped crystal at its center, surrounded by intricate symbols Diana couldn't decipher. She'd noticed it before, of course, but today it seemed to glow with an inner light, catching her attention in a way it never had before. Thomas looked up, his green eyes, identical to Diana's, holding ancient wisdom as he studied his daughter. He quickly turned the ring inward, a gesture that seemed practiced, almost guilty.
"There's my sleepyhead,"
her mother said, turning to kiss Diana's forehead.
"The dreams again?"
Diana nodded, accepting a cup of coffee from her father. "They're getting stronger," she admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "More real. I can smell the salt water, feel the currents." She trailed off, not wanting to worry them more than they already were. Her father exchanged a look with her mother, one of those silent conversations they thought she didn't notice.
"Perhaps it's time,"
she said softly, but her father shook his head.
"Not yet, Joy. Let her have a normal life a little longer."
Diana pretended not to hear, but her heart raced. What weren't they telling her? What did they know about these dreams? Joyce continued more quietly, but Diana strained to hear.
"Lyra won't wait forever. Sooner or later, the summer court will come for Diana. We must prepare her."
"Let her keep this normal life a bit longer,"
Thomas replied, her voice tight with concern. Diana's breath caught. The summer court? Who was Lyra? And what did they want with her?
You should get ready for class.
Joyce said, breaking the tension.
Isn't Mark picking you up?
Yeah, Diana gulped down her coffee. We're getting breakfast before my plant biology lecture. She didn't mention how the dreams made her feel distant from Mark lately, how his careful plans for their future sometimes felt like a cage. Then I head to the aquarium.
The tide pool exhibit again?
Thomas asked, his voice carefully neutral. But something in his tone made Diana look at him sharply. Had his eyes always been that exact shade of green? Yeah, it's weird. The animals seem calmer when I'm around, especially lately. She grabbed her bag, missing the worried look her parents exchanged. I'll be home late. Bonfire tonight. As she turned to leave, she noticed an ornate envelope on the counter, sealed with what looked like wax imprinted with a celestial symbol, a star surrounded by smaller stars in a pattern reminiscent of the frost on her window. "What's that?" she asked, gesturing toward the envelope. Thomas hesitated before answering.
From your grandmother, Rose. She feels it's time you learn who you truly are.
Before Diana could reach for it, Joyce smoothly slid the envelope into a drawer.
Later, honey. You'll be late for Mark.
Diana,
Her father said, his voice carrying that musical quality it got when he was about to say something important.
you know you can tell us anything, right? About the dreams, about any changes you might be experiencing.
She thought about the stranger-than-usual things that had been happening lately. Plants reaching for her like they did for her father, and the way she sometimes caught glimpses of other realities in reflective surfaces. But she wasn't ready to face what those things really mean. Not yet. "I know, Dad," she said, managing a smile. "I'm fine, really." Before heading upstairs, she paused by her father's lotus flowers. Almost without thinking, she brushed her fingertips across one of the blue blooms. It responded instantly, unfurling further and emitting a soft, ethereal glow. Thomas watched with a mixture of pride and concern.
It recognizes its queen.
He whispered, almost to himself. In the hallway, Diana caught Joyce's hushed voice from the kitchen.
Alexander has requested another audience.
Thomas sighed deeply.
Then the balance is shifting sooner than we feared.
But as she headed back upstairs, Diana caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something else there. A crown of light hovering above her head, her green eyes glowing with an inner fire, and behind her, the shadowy suggestion of wings. She blinked, and her normal reflection returned. Just a young woman trying to make sense of a world that felt increasingly less familiar with each passing day. Diana hurried down the stairs of her family's Victorian home near Cannery Row. Mark was waiting outside in his Toyota Prius, already dressed in scrubs for his hospital volunteering shift after class. His dark hair was neatly combed, his smile bright and certain, as Diana slid into the passenger seat. He leaned over to kiss her, and she tried to ignore how wrong it felt lately. Like her body was expecting something else.
"You look tired."
He said, pulling away from the curb.
"More weird dreams?"
"They're not weird," Diana said automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, yeah, just stress probably." Mark launched into his usual speech about proper sleep schedules and the importance of maintaining good habits for future medical school applications. Diana let his words wash over her, staring out at Monterey Bay as they drove along the coast. The morning fog was rolling in, thick and mysterious, and for a moment she thought she saw shapes moving in it. Impossible shapes, beautiful and terrible.
"And you're not listening."
Mark said, not unkindly.
"Is everything okay? You've been distant lately."
Diana forced herself to smile. "Everything's fine, just tired." But as they parked near the cafe, she could have sworn she saw someone watching them from the shadows. A tall figure with eyes that glowed a light violet. The figure made no move toward her, but Diana felt it. An ancient awareness brushing against her mind, seeing not just her face but her bloodline, her soul.
You're listening to Tides of Fire, Prophecy of Atlantis by C.D. Harrison. If you'd like to experience the story beyond these episodes, the novel Tides of Fire is available now on Kindle Unlimited, as well as in paperback and hardcover wherever books are sold. Now, back to the story.
The bonfire crackled and hissed, casting long, dancing shadows across the sand. The flames leapt high, their orange and yellow hues contrasting starkly against the twilight sky. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wood smoke and salt water, mingling it with the laughter and chatter of the students bragging about their Halloween plans coming up while they gathered around the fire. Diana, her cheeks flushed from the warmth of the flames, scanned the crowd for a familiar face. Mark had picked her up from her biology lecture, insisting on driving despite her offer to meet him there. The drive along the coast had been pleasant, filled with easy conversation about her latest shift at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and his hospital volunteering, though she'd been distracted by the strange sensation of being watched that had plagued her all day. A smile lit up her features as she spotted Mark, his silhouette illuminated by the flickering firelight. He was returning from getting them drinks, weaving through the clusters of students who were sharing stories and jokes, their voices punctuated by the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. As he approached, Mark's face broke into a grin, the glow of the bonfire reflected in his eyes, warming them with a welcoming light.
There you are.
Mark said. He was no longer in his scrubs, but dressed in jeans and an indigo sweater that brought out his soft brown eyes. Diana felt a flutter in her chest as he approached. Despite her recent doubts, despite everything, seeing him still made her heart race.
I saved us a spot,
he said, taking her hand and leading her to a blanket spread just beyond the firelight, close enough to feel its warmth. They sat beside each other, shoulders touching, watching the flames. Mark handed her a cup of juice mixed with several types of liquor that Kyle, Mark's old roommate, had made for the party.
How was the rest of your day?
He asked, his voice soft. Better now, Diana admitted truthfully. The strange incidents at the aquarium, the way the sea lions seemed to whisper to her, how the tide pool creatures reached for her with impossible awareness, seemed less troubling in Mark's comforting presence. Their conversation flowed easily as the stars appeared above them. When Mark leaned in to kiss her, Diana surprised herself by responding with unexpected intensity. She pulled him closer, fingers tangling in his dark hair, a strange energy pulsing through her veins. The bonfire crackled nearby, casting dancing shadows and painting their faces in a warm, flickering glow. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and the salty tang of the nearby ocean. As they kissed, Diana felt an overwhelming rush of emotion. It was more than just the physical attraction they shared. It was a deep-seated feeling of connection and affection that she had never experienced before. In that moment, Diana knew that she was falling in love with Mark. The realization excited and terrified her. It was a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated, a depth of feeling that went far beyond the comfortable companionship they had developed over the past 8 months. As his lips moved against hers, she felt a sense of peace and belonging that she had never known before. But with that feeling came a flicker of fear. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if this was just a fleeting infatuation for him? The questions swirled in her mind, threatening to dampen the euphoria of the moment. She pushed them aside, determined to savor the present and embrace the uncertainty of the future. She pulled back slightly, studying his face. Could he accept her if he knew what she really was? Half human, half fae. The thought of losing him made her chest ache.
What's wrong?
Mark asked, noticing her change in expression. Nothing, Diana whispered, kissing him again. Everything's perfect. But even as she said it, a cold feeling washed over her. From the darkness beyond the bonfire's glow, Diana sensed something watching them, something ancient and otherworldly that made her fae blood run cold. The feeling was unmistakable, a prickling awareness that slithered down her spine. She pulled away from Mark abruptly, suddenly tense. The presence in the darkness was getting closer. She could feel it. Whatever lurked there knew what she was.
Are you okay?
Mark asked, concern evident in his voice. Diana took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The watcher in the darkness was still there, but she refused to let fear drive her away from Mark from this moment. "Actually," she said, her voice low and intimate, "I think I'd rather not stay here." She met his eyes, letting the heat of her gaze convey her meaning. "What do you say we go back to your apartment instead?" Mark's eyes widened slightly, then his expression softened into a smile that made her heart skip.
I'd like that,
he said, rising and offering his hand to help her up. As they gathered their things and walked back toward the parking lot where Mark had parked his Prius, she took 10 deep breaths to steady her heart and mind. Tonight belonged to her and Mark, and she wouldn't let anything, human or otherworldly, take that away from her. She knew her parents wouldn't wait up. Her mother would likely be at the hospital working the night shift, and her father would be in his study with his flowers and herbs that responded to his touch. Tonight she could find comfort and safety in Mark's arms, away from the watchful eyes in the darkness. The door to Mark's apartment had barely closed behind them when Diana pulled him close again, their lips meeting with renewed urgency. The drive from the beach had been charged with anticipation, stolen glances and hands that found each other across the center console. Now, with the rest of the world locked outside, Diana let herself surrender to the feelings she'd been holding back. Mark's apartment was small but neat, a pre-med student sanctuary with medical textbooks stacked on a coffee table and notes carefully arranged on a desk in the corner. A single lamp cast warm light across the space, illuminating framed photos of his family, and one of them together at Point Lobos, his arm around her shoulders.
Do you want something to drink?
Mark asked softly, his forehead resting against hers, always the considerate host, even in moments like this. Diana smiled, her green eyes meeting his brown ones. "Just you," she whispered, running her fingers through his carefully combed hair, messing it up in a way that made him look less like the serious pre-med student and more like the man she'd fallen for. As Mark led her toward his bedroom, Diana felt the constellation of freckles across her nose and cheeks warm slightly, a response of her fey blood to heightened emotion. She wondered briefly if he noticed how they sometimes seemed to shimmer in certain lights, another sign of her dual nature that she hadn't yet explained. The bedroom was simple, a double bed with navy blue covers, a nightstand with a reading lamp, and a window that offered a glimpse of Monterey Bay in the distance. Diana's caramel skin glowed in the soft light as Mark's hands traced patterns across her shoulders, his touch reverent and searching.
You're beautiful,
he murmured, eyes taking in her spiral black curls spread across his pillow, the freckles that dusted her face like stars. If he noticed how they seemed to pulse with a subtle inner light, he didn't comment, just brushed his lips across them with gentle wonder. Diana pulled him closer, wanting to lose herself in this moment, in him. Her fingers found the buttons of his indigo sweater, undoing them slowly as she tried to ignore the persistent feeling that something extraordinary was happening inside her. Not just the natural progression of their relationship, but something deeper, connected to her bloodline. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, saying the words aloud for the first time. The admission made her feel vulnerable and powerful. Mark paused, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes.
I love you too, Diana,
replied, his voice thick with emotion.
More than I thought possible.
As their bodies joined in the ancient dance of lovers, Diana briefly wondered what Mark would think if he knew the truth about her, about the dreams of underwater cities, about how her reflection sometimes showed glimpses of another self with wings made of light. Would he still look at her with such perfect devotion? Or would his rational, scientific mind recoil from what couldn't be explained? For tonight, she pushed those fears aside. Tonight was about connection, about finding shelter in each other's arms against whatever watched from the shadows. Tonight, she was simply Diana, a young woman in love, her body moving in perfect harmony with Mark's as they whispered promises against each other's skin. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Mark's fingers traced lazy patterns along her arm.
Stay,
he murmured, half asleep.
Don't go home tonight.
Diana nestled closer, listening to his heartbeat. For once, the dreams that had plagued her felt distant, kept at bay by Mark's steady presence. "I'll stay," she promised, knowing her parents wouldn't worry. Her mother would assume she was studying late at the library, and her father would understand more than she could explain. Outside, the moon cast silver light across Monterey Bay. Somewhere in the darkness, ancient forces stirred. But here, in this moment, wrapped in Mark's arms, Diana felt truly at peace. Half human, half fae, wholly herself, and completely loved. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a gentle glow across Mark's bedroom. Diana stirred slowly, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. Mark slept peacefully beside her, his face relaxed in a way that made him look younger than the serious pre-med student she usually saw. A flutter of movement by the window caught her attention, a small bird that seemed to be watching her with unusual interest. Not a normal bird, Diana realized, but something else entirely. Its feathers shimmered with iridescent colors that didn't belong to any species she recognized from her biology studies. As it noticed her gaze, it took flight, vanishing in a shimmer of light. Diana carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Mark. She padded to the window and peered outside. The morning fog was rolling in from Monterey Bay, thick and mysterious, and for a moment she thought she saw shapes moving within it, impossible shapes. The freckles across her nose and cheeks tingled, responding to whatever presence lingered just beyond normal sight.
Hey,
Mark's sleepy voice came from behind her.
everything okay?
Diana turned, composing her expression into a smile. Mark sat up in bed, his dark hair tousled from sleep. His eyes, warm and concerned, studied her with the attention he gave everything that mattered to him. "Just watching the fog roll in," she said, returning to the bed and sitting beside him. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close to kiss her temple.
You look worried.
Diana hesitated. Last night had been perfect, their bodies learning each other, whispering words of love in the darkness. The last thing she wanted was to spoil the morning after, with talk of strange birds and mysterious figures in the fog. But the constant sensation of being watched had returned, and something told her that her time of normalcy was running short. "Mark," she began carefully, "have you ever felt like there's more to the world than what we can see? Things beyond science, beyond explanation?" His brow furrowed slightly, the expression he got when presented with an interesting academic problem.
There are plenty of things science hasn't explained yet,
He replied thoughtfully.
but that doesn't mean they're unexplainable.
Diana nodded, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertip. And if something seemed impossible? Something that defied everything you know about how the world works? Mark caught her hand, bringing it to his lips.
Is this about your dreams? The underwater cities you mentioned?
She looked up, surprised. "You remember that?" "I only mentioned it once."
I remember everything you tell me, Diana.
His expression became more serious.
And I've noticed other things too.
He smiled gently.
I'm observant. That's why I'll make a good doctor.
Diana felt her heart racing. "And what do you think about all that?" Mark was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on hers.
I think
He said slowly.
that I love you.
He brushed a curl from her face.
And I think that when you're ready to tell me whatever's bothering you, I'll be ready to listen. Without judgment.
Relief flooded through Diana. She hadn't realized how much tension she'd been carrying until this moment. She hadn't been ready to tell him everything. About her Fae heritage, about her father's true nature, about the strange occurrences that kept happening around her. But knowing that he had noticed and still looked at her with such acceptance made the future seem less frightening. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. The kiss deepened as they sank back against the pillows. Diana felt the same electricity between them as the night before, her body responding to his touch as if they'd been made for each other. Later, as they shared coffee in his small kitchen, Diana checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother, likely wondering where she was. A text from her father that simply read, "Be careful today, little star." Her father's cryptic warnings had become more frequent lately, but this one sent a chill down her spine. "I should probably head home," she said reluctantly. "My mom's worried, no doubt." Mark nodded, though disappointment flickered in his eyes.
I'll drive you.
"It's okay, I can walk. It's not far." Diana needed time to think, to process the fact that Mark had noticed her differences and accepted them.
Not a chance.
Mark said firmly.
Not after you practically jumped out of your skin at the bonfire last night. Something scared you, and until I know what it was, I'm not letting you walk home alone.
His protectiveness touched her, even though she knew whatever had been watching them from the shadows would hardly be deterred by a pre-med student, no matter how caring. Still, she didn't argue as they cleaned up breakfast and headed toward his car. As they drove through the foggy streets of Monterey, Diana watched the shapes in the mist, wondering when her 2 worlds would finally collide, and whether Mark would still look at her with such love when they did.